not crush DeSantis and Haley in Iowa. The New York Times says he crushed DeSantis and Haley in Iowa, and Politico also used, quote, crushing and record-setting and vaulting, and some clown from Axios named Zachary Basu wrote he couldn't have scripted it any better, and the headline was Trump's perfect night, and the reality is Trump got 56,260 votes in a primary, and that is about half the size of this podcast's daily audience. And Trump only got 51% of the votes in Iowa. And if President Biden got only 51% in a primary, they would cancel everything on television for the next 26 days and cover nothing but Biden only getting 51% in a primary right up until kickoff on Super Bowl Sunday 26 days from now. Biden Crisis Day 26. We pause now for football. Here's the anthem. Join Wolf Blitzer, Tucker Carlson, David Axelrod, and Usher at halftime for a preview of Biden Crisis Day 27. It's madness. Political media in this country has been in free fall since the 1990s. Hell, I succeeded in it. No experience necessary. But still, it is hard to believe it could have ever been worse than it is right now. Even more a victim of bandwagoning, even more a John overflowing unto eternity. Each reporter abandoning reality and objectivity to prove that their take was right, or that their next take is first, or that they can stuff more undeserved accolades into a sentence than anybody else. It's not that they are obsessed with the horse race. The horse race coverage is fine. Horse race coverage is necessary. The horse race coverage is often predictive and useful, but goddamn, when it's a pack of miniature ponies struggling to make it around a 10-foot track, say that. Don't call them Secretariat and Man of War and BoJack Horseman. Ron DeSantis is untethered from reality and literally like the definition of a tragic hero from classic Greek literature or from Shakespeare. He has only realized too late his mistake, and fate has already doomed him before he finally started his full-throated attack on the ubiquity of Trump's corruption. And now that he has seen the light and is telling the truth, he's damaged goods and finished. And Nikki Haley is an absolute moron, and she will say anything except the truth, and she has already pre-endorsed Trump for that day when he finally eliminates her. And neither of the two of them had the presence of mind to look at the polls and say, one of us might defeat Trump in Iowa, but the other has to drop out, and whichever one of us runs has to really hit him in the nuts with all barrels. Seabiscuit and Mr. Ed, they are not. The true takeaways from Iowa are the true last-minute break glass in event of emergency instruction for New Hampshire next week is Trump may have gotten a lot more votes than Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or anybody else, but he only got 2,222 more votes than everybody else. And I don't know about you, but out of 110,000 votes, I don't think that's exactly Trump is back to command the national psyche. He never actually left, which was the headline on top of the article by who else? Maggie Haberman. 2,222 more votes. Loser J. Trump. That's one actual takeaway from Iowa. It leads to the second takeaway. One opponent not looking to protect his or her ass if they lose to Trump. One opponent willing to stand up to this monster could defeat him, or at minimum force him to campaign hard through the entirety of the Republican primaries. There's also a third takeaway, which is that individually, with the great undulating, pulsating cowardice of somebody spending their entire lives standing right next to the fire exit, neither of these schlemiels is going to stop Trump, who always can rely on the fact that he has the courage of his brain damage. The fourth takeaway is that individually, Haley and DeSantis may have lost to Trump Monday, but yesterday, Trump went right back to losing to E. Jean Carroll. And the fifth takeaway is that when I first said, leaving out the top dozen people in each field, if tomorrow you switched all the sports reporters and all the political reporters, the quality of political reporting in this country would instantly double and then get even better with 1 week of training for the new political writers. I was being conservative. When I first said that in 1997. The ultimate reason that the internet and newspapers and TV and social media will continue to spill over with hysterical hype about Trump's unbeatability proven in Iowa, where he won by 2,222 votes, proven in Iowa, unbeatable. The ultimate reason that we're going to continue to hear that is to say that is the case, is to fit into one of the 10 or so templates that American political reporters can actually understand. They feel comfortable rewriting something they first wrote in 1997. Ooh, he got 30% more than the runner-up. I can use words I understand again. Never mind that the only part of the Trump campaign that has ever happened before in American history, which is an ex-president running to regain the office, that has not happened in the last 112 years, and the relevant parts, like he's facing 91 charges, like he could die in prison, like he actually isn't eligible to be president under the 14th Amendment, like he's criminally insane, like he seems to be rapidly deteriorating both mentally and physically, those actually important parts have not happened before, and that makes political reporters nervous. And boy, did they sigh with relief when they all realized they could go back and use words like crushing and record-setting and vaulting and perfect and commanding. Because for half a century in this country, political reporters have secretly all believed that what they write is not about the candidates, it is about themselves. It was the prolific British author and journalist Arnold Bennett who said it best. Bennett wrote for 50 years. His novel about the striver who inadvertently invented the credit card, a novel called The Card, was made into one of the most underrated films ever produced, with Alec Guinness, no less. Arnold Bennett summed up this problem. Journalists say a thing they know isn't true in the hope that if they keep on saying it long enough, it will be true. Trump got 2,222 votes more than the other candidates. The town of Mediapolis, Iowa, Medipolis, Mediapolis, 5 miles north of Burlington. You can't miss it. It's between Pegtown Cemetery and the fine dog breeders at Country Road Westies. The town of Mediapolis, Iowa, is 2,214 souls in residence. Trump won by 2,222. Minneapolis has 2,214. Trump carried Minneapolis. Just barely. And the media wants you to believe, as Minneapolis goes, so goes the nation. By the way, Trump has also launched something new in Iowa that may be far more relevant than the actual vote counts and anything that was written about that primary. It is the new con. It is the new 2024 Trump model con. The new Trump con is the God con. I played you a clip of him yesterday, just saying the word God as often as possible, pretending to know what it means. Then, during his victory speech, he looked skyward, supposedly to honor his late mother-in-law, communicate with his late mother-in-law, tell God, hey, my late mother-in-law would like a seat over on the left somewhere. His late mother-in-law, whose name he could not remember even if you gave him $1 million if he did. I think, though, there was another explanation for him looking up into the rafters. There was a plate of fries up there. Anyway, they always roll out the new con too quickly, too obviously. First, we had that thing at the end of the Iowa with him looking up in the rafters for the French fries. And then the younger of his twin idiot sons, Eric, went on some Bible thumper podcast and thumped the Bible and is now claiming divine intervention got Trump elected. That is the con. Although talk about not being able to remember names. Listen to this. Doesn't this sound like Eric Trump can't remember the word God?
Someone, something is looking down and guiding him every single day, because there's no way in the world he could have been where he is today without the intervention of God. And
Amen.
I feel it. I know it. I really do believe that there's divine intervention there. I think somebody was guiding him.
Yeah. If otherworldly intervention was involved in this, that wasn't God. Back here in the real world, the rest of the Republican Party is still filled with all the people you really wouldn't want to meet. Nikki Haley is, simply put, full of shit. She may in fact be a science experiment in which artificial intelligence experts literally stitched together all known cliches and excuses and took the result and somehow gave it the ability to breathe and speak and smirk. From CNN.
How do you feel about your party's frontrunner being held liable for sexual abuse?
I mean, first of all, I haven't paid attention to his cases, and I'm not a lawyer. All I know is that he's innocent until proven guilty, and when he's proven guilty and he's sitting in a courtroom, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You've got investigations on Trump and Biden.
Yeah, Nikki, he was convicted. Already been convicted. The hearing yesterday that you're talking about was about how much he has to pay in damages. And you want to be the Republican nominee for president, but you're not paying attention to the developments that could force the guy ahead of you out of the race. Sure. And this was after she had imploded on I Am Out of Fox. I hate to run their stuff, but this you got to hear verbatim. The first voice you will hear is Brian Kilmeade, and if you think my point about the vacuousness of political media is overstated, Brian Kilmeade's job, right before he started to co-anchor Fox and Friends, was as the sideline reporter for telecasts on the Madison Square Garden TV network for a soccer team called the New Jersey Metro Stars.
Are you a racist party? Are you involved in a racist party?
No, we're not a racist country, Brian. We've never been a racist country.
Racist? Of course not. We've never, ever been racist. And the Civil War wasn't just about slavery. But of course, you don't have to go all the way back to Jim Crow or the Civil War or Trump's birtherism even to address the reality of racism in this country. You only have to go back to Monday. The podcaster and political writer Will Salatan, whose older brother Paul and I were best friends in the 4th and 5th grades, quoted an Iowa voter about Ramaswamy. I'm not being prejudiced, guys, but I don't like his name. I don't like where he came from. After 9/11, I still harbor a lot of hard feelings. Ramaswamy came from Cincinnati. And Monday night, Ramaswamy realized that all the money in the world is not going to get him into the Republican club. The Republican club, full of sick, diseased MFers. And the irony of ironies, the saddest part of the entire dementia J. Trump nightmare is that the first people they will turn on after they have caged or purged or killed all the Latinos and all the transgenders and all the gays and all the intellectuals, the first people they will turn on are Vivek Ramaswamy and Nick Fuentes and Larry Elder and Tim Scott and Nikki Haley. And when they turn on Nikki Haley, the first thing they will do is make her wear a sign that has her birth name on it. Ramaswamy dropped out, and if Haley and DeSantis don't combine campaigns, both of them will drop out. And Asa Hutchinson dropped out yesterday, and you're thinking, what? Yesterday? I thought Hutchinson dropped out last year. He does exit with a very sad but very true final quote. My message of being a principled Republican with experience and telling the truth about the current frontrunner did not sell in Iowa. Two postscripts to this magnificent Trump 2,222 vote decisive world-ending victory. Steve Bannon went on social media yesterday and posted a picture of Trump celebrating his 51-49 triumph with the caption, "Come Retribution." Come Retribution is not just the name of a harrowing book about the dying Confederacy's various plots to kidnap and assassinate President Lincoln, but it was also the informal name by which the Confederacy referred to its various plots to kidnap and assassinate President Lincoln. And while I get Bannon's overall shtick, I mean, he is a murderous psychopath, I get it, I'm not sure I understand why he put "Come Retribution" on top of a picture of Trump, because to me, that implies Steve Bannon has plans to kidnap and assassinate Trump. But you do you, Rasputin. And lastly, Trump is deteriorating rapidly. There's no mistaking it now. It is now spreading from what are admittedly variable facts. Yeah, Biden and Obama have both been president. At least when you mistake one for the other, you're only confusing two of the same thing. Even his mistakes about years make some sense. He was not president in 2016, but he was president-elect. But this is calling something by the wrong name when the only commonality is that the right name and the wrong name sound somewhat similar. This is my ultimate Trump takeaway from Iowa.
He endorsed me 4 months before I knew I was running, about 4 months before the Escalade ride down with our great First Lady.
Up the down Escalade on the Esplanade, covered in marmalade, which is what Trump's brain is turning into. Also of interest here, funniest doggone thing. Looks like the contempt of Congress charge against Hunter Biden just went bye-bye. Where will Marjorie Taylor Greene get her new porn? That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news. Some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline, Capitol Hill. You have heard bupkis about Hunter Biden and contempt of Congress this week, and you may never hear about Hunter Biden and contempt of Congress again. CNN reporting that the House Rules Committee yesterday abruptly dropped contempt resolutions, and its sources say the Republican Waste Our Tax Dollar committees, quote, continue to engage with the Hunter Biden legal team about a deposition, meaning when he showed up to the contempt hearing last week and stared down Comer and Jordan and Barney Rubble and all the rest of the idiots, and the political media called it a stunt. No, actually, he won. This is especially bad news for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Where will she get her next naked pictures of Hunter Biden? Dateline, Madison Square Garden, New York. The worst owner in sports, James Dolan of the New York Knicks, Rangers, the Garden, and that large pimple-shaped arena in Las Vegas, has been sued by a massage therapist named Kelly Croft. She says that in 2014, she was pressured into unwanted sex with Mr. Dolan. and that Dolan then manipulated her and brought her to California, where she found herself alone in a hotel room in Beverly Hills with Harvey Weinstein, who then chased her and raped her. In her lawsuit, Ms. Croft accuses Dolan of assault and sex trafficking. As typical in such suits, there is no accompanying evidence. You present that at the trial, not in a press release about a lawsuit, so there is no independent verification. On the other hand, there is this. James Dolan is a scumbag. Well, he is. He's the guy who put the facial recognition technology in place at the entrances to Radio City Music Hall in Madison Square Garden and would not admit anybody who worked for the law firms that were involved in lawsuits against him, even though they had bought tickets. Scumbag. Still ahead on Countdown, we had snow here yesterday, first time in 701 days. And the windows got that kind of extra cold feel to it that only snow can produce. And as always, when that happens, I flash back to the day my doctor gave me a medication I was not prepared for. And the next thing I knew, my face was stuck by a frozen drool to the window of the Metro North commuter train I had taken into Grand Central Station. Truly, the drool of regret without the pillow of remorse, in Things I Promised Not to Tell. Next. First time for the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. If you're not familiar with this place, Russia is a failed state that's kind of near Sweden. Yesterday, it posted to social media 3 photos, one of Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, standing between a Ukrainian soldier and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, a second photo of Zelensky taking a photo of the Prime Minister and that soldier, and the third photo, a close-up of what appears to be a tattoo of the soldier's hand. It writes, "A picture worth 1,000 words. There is no God," says the tattoo, and indeed for the unholy Kiev regime, neo-Nazis, and their warmongering, blah, 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 blah. The implication was that a tattoo that read, "There is no God," was on Zelensky's hand, which would have to be a neat trick since he's shown taking the photo, and the hand, whatever the tattoo says, is that of the soldier. Come on, losers. You're not just talking to your idiot citizens who believe your kindergarten propaganda and keep electing that bastard Putin. You're in the big leagues now. Lie better. Runners up, speaking of which, worser, podcaster Chad Kultgen and Will Sasso of Mad TV, calling themselves an AI comedy troupe called Dudesy. Dudesy has posted to YouTube a comedy special called George Carlin, I'm Glad I'm Dead, in which its AI avatar claims that it listened to all of my friend Mr. Carlin's work and studied it and is doing an impression of him. My other friend, George's daughter, Kelly, has demanded that these idiots pull the thing off YouTube because it's not an impression. She says it's just her father's voice and some of his jokes repurposed. The art form of comedy is such a unique expression of the human mind and journey, Kelly Carlin writes. This bastardization of existing comedic material feels like a very sad day for the art form and all human expression. She's right. The fact is, George Carlin was not just profound, he was prolific. There is enough material of him, by him, not some bad remix by some 2-bit podcaster and somebody desperate enough to admit he was associated with the horribly unfunny Mad TV, that it could last you for a year-long binge. All George Carlin all the time. How I miss George. But our winner, the worst, Nate Cohn of the New York Times, posting to Twitter X and explaining a data glitch from Iowa. We had a hic-up with the GOP precinct feed, he writes. Cool. But he spells hiccup H-I-C-K-UP. H-I-C-K-UP? Did they change it? Was there a vote and I missed it? HICCUP. I mean, here I am going back to how lost American political reporters are, and I'm just stomping this thing into the ground by now, but I did a little work on Nate's curious spelling of hiccup. And why would you think that the American political media system is in disarray when it turns out its chief political polling analyst at the New York Times uses the spelling of hiccup that was last seen in the edition of Webster's Dictionary that was published in the year 1828? Nate, yes, I am about to celebrate my 200th birthday, cone, 2 days. Worst person in the world! To the number one story on the countdown and things I promised not to tell, and this is anything but an important career story, but I was reminded of it recently and I laughed like hell, so I thought maybe you should too. I haven't seen all of them in this country, but to my mind, the most underrated of American rivers is the one I grew up along, the Hudson. It gets a bad rap because it's associated with New York City and the deteriorating remnants of the city's once dominant piers, some of which have been unused and rotting for half a century now. But further upstate, literally just past the city line, the Hudson is a magnificent river just to watch, never mind ride on. This is particularly true during a stretch in which the western side of the river is fronted by a series of sheer cliffs called the Palisades, brownish black and striated, carved as the river took shape millions of years ago, but always looking like they had been carefully designed for aesthetic effect. Unfortunately, they are best seen from the commuter railroad that runs along the Hudson into Westchester County, New York, instead of a series of parks or even private palaces. Our forefathers had the presence of mind to build factories and copper processing plants and other nightmares right on the Hudson because of the obvious transportation benefits the Hudson provided. And so the train tracks were laid out next to the river because that made it even easier to get stuff to and from the big city, and damn the views or the ability to appreciate life on the water or the pollution. Still, if you ever find yourself now taking a train from Grand Central Station into the western half of Westchester, get a window seat on the left side of the train, or better yet, when you come back into New York City, sit on the right side, on the river side, and you will get 15 minutes or more of the most magnificent view imaginable out the big windows. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, the Palisades provide the Hudson with a magnificent frame that's almost like a miniature Grand Canyon. I remember thinking of all this that one day early in 1980. I was finally feeling a little better thanks to Dr. Cecilini. Dr. Cecilini had been my physician since I was a boy, and he was the school doctor, and he'd been the town doctor since about 1944. And he always name-dropped other patients I'd never heard of. And as I finished my last growth spurt at the end of my 20th year, I had frequent back pain, no fun at all. And sleeping on the floor helped a little, but not enough. And finally, Cecilini, who had been a hospital doctor during World War II and had seen everything, said, "Hey, just get this prescription filled. Take one of them every day for the next week. It's called a muscle relaxant. This will loosen up your back. It'll lessen the pain a little bit. Just don't operate any heavy machinery." Do you operate heavy machinery when you do those sportscasts of yours, Keith? I had a patient try to run a processor at the copper factory while he took this in 1957. Lost 3 fingers. Leonardo Benvenuti. You know any of the Benvenutis used to live on William Street? I laughed. This was him every time. The Benvenutis on William Street. The Smiths on William Street. The Williams on Smith Street. Anyway, back to the muscle relaxants. I don't think I had ever heard of them before, let alone taken one. I took my barking back to the pharmacy in my hometown of Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. I got the prescription filled. I bought a soda at the pizza parlor across the street, and I ambled down the tiny village's picturesque business district. It's 3 blocks long. Past the statue our old neighbor Jacques Lipschitz donated, and the ultra-modern library, and right into the train station. It was January. It was about 12 degrees. And as I waited for the train to make its 40-minute trip into the city in my job as a sportscaster for the radio network of United Press International, I took the pill. What were they called again? muscle relaxants that Dr. C had given me and given his other patient, Rico Randazzo, or was that some guy he mentioned in 1966 to me? I worked the night shift at UPI, so the train was almost always empty, and thus I almost always had my choice of window seats. Midday and midwinter combined to make the sun glisten with extra sparkle off the magnificent Hudson, and the sun's angle was such that the Palisades behind them gleamed brightly as well. And I was thinking about just how gorgeous they were and how underrated the Hudson was. And I felt myself drifting away. I felt two hands, one on each shoulder, shaking me violently. Hey, buddy! Hey, buddy! I fought to open my eyes and to avoid the bad breath now enveloping my face. As I finally came around, I realized it was the conductor who had just taken my ticket. The train wasn't moving. In fact, only half of the lights were on in the train. The Palisades were long gone. Not the Hudson nor the Palisades, but darkness came in through the windows. I was completely confused. Come on, shake it off. You got to get out of here. This is as far as we go. Train's going out of service. You don't get off now, you'll be parked under 37th Street for the rest of the day. Through my fog and my haze, I finally began to understand what had happened and where I was. And I began to try to stand when a horrifying awareness overtook me. I could not move the right side of my face. What was worse, I could barely feel the right side of my face. Good God, what had happened to me? Was this like that haunting episode of Alfred Hitchcock where the woman is struggling to wake up and remember the details of the accident out on San Francisco Bay the night before? Only as it finally comes back to her, it turns out the accident had drowned her boyfriend, and the reason it was so difficult to remember was, as she realized only when she got up and saw her reflection in a mirror, that the accident hadn't happened last night, but it had happened in 1905, and she'd been in an insane asylum for half a century. Was that what had happened to me? No, actually. As I discovered when my struggle finally freed my face from the train window to which it had stuck because I had drooled for like 35 consecutive minutes, because I had taken the muscle relaxant, because I had taken it on an empty stomach, because I knew nothing about muscle relaxants, because I was out cold with my mouth open, pressed up against the train window on a 12-degree day, and I had gotten frozen to the glass. Look, it was not quite half a century in an insane asylum, but certainly more embarrassing. It seemed like it took me half a century to pull all of this together. I stood up wobbly. I apologized to the conductor, and I mumbled, back pain, new drug. And as I banked from one side of the doorway to the other and bounced out onto the platform, the conductor shouted after me, "Only take 'em at night, huh?" That little saga. Yeah, Doc, my back is better, but I left half the skin on my right cheek frozen to the 120 from Hastings to Grand Central. He'd probably say, well, yeah, that happened to another patient of mine, Carlo Lombardo. That reminded me of a much later story from Dr. Cecilini, and I don't want to leave the wrong impression here. Edward Cecilini was a terrific doctor. He practiced into his 90s. He used to tell me to come visit him at his practice in his home on Farragut Parkway anytime I was up from the city visiting my folks. Well, just shoot the breeze. And he'd tell me about something about treating Umberto Flambini in the Army Hospital in 1944. And he'd ask me if I went to school with Marco Bartolini and then say he had to go. He was taking a course over at SUNY Purchase about the latest computer-aided diagnostic tool. The man was 90 years old. He never stopped learning. Great man. And did he howl at the muscle relaxant story? Sorry, I didn't warn you. Oh, well, just take him at night. I had another patient do that in 1917. It was just... All right, anyway, now it's 1995, and I'm working at ESPN, and I'm supposed to fly to Vancouver to do a cameo in an Adam Sandler golf movie, which I suppose was Happy Gilmore. And I didn't want to try to fly to Chicago and then change for Vancouver after going the 2 hours from the middle of Connecticut to JFK. So I came in to my folks' house the day before. I took the folks out to dinner. I stayed over in the spare room to leave from their house to the airport in the morning. And at some point in the middle of the night, I began to have chest pains. Literally, the top of my ribs hurt and my breathing was constricted and I couldn't get back to sleep. And now I'm thinking, I don't know what's wrong, but something is wrong. So I canceled the trip. And I head up to Dr. Cicilline as soon as he's opened up shop, and he's 85 now, and he gives me the big welcome as usual, and I tell him the story, and he says, oh, well, yeah, I think it's nothing to worry about, but we should get this on the record just in case your movie company gets pissy with you about canceling. That happened to another friend of mine, patient, Francesco Lollobrigida. He had a cameo in Moby Dick in 1956. He had to cancel. He wanted to sue him. How about you get your dad just drive you up to the hospital in Dobbs Ferry? I'll meet you there. Like half an hour and a half, something like that. Let me just run a couple of tests on you when we get you up. There's no rush whatsoever. Now he stares off into space for a second. And he looks back at me. He says, I got an idea a little simpler. I have to go there later up to drop off some paperwork on some other guy. Frisco Gaspucci. You know Frisco? Anyway, just give me a second. I'll call him and I'll tell him we're coming up. And you just hop in the car with me. Go out in the waiting room. I'm going to call him about Frisco, and I got to worry about doctor-patient confidentiality. But about Frisco Gaspucci, so, I got to worry about that, so I don't want you listening to this. So now, Ed Cicilline is driving me to Dobbs Ferry Hospital, and I'm thinking about how much he defines the idea of a really dedicated doctor and how every other patient he's ever mentioned to me, I've never heard of one of them. And we get to the hospital, and I don't know, we talked about baseball or my folks or something, and he drives right up to the ER, and we walk in like it's nothing, and he waves to the admitting nurse. Hi, Sheila. How's your son, Sheila? And he points at me, he says, that's the guy. And he says, like it was absolutely the way they do it at every hospital, you can get all his info from him after we run this little check on him, all right? And we go right into the room, and two nurses are in there, and they say hi, and one of them tells me to take off my shirt. The other starts shaving places on my chest, and before I know what's happening, I've got electrodes on me, and they're hooking me up to an EKG, and they're drawing blood, and Cicilline reads the start of the EKG printout, and he smiles at me. He says, I'm sorry, I scammed you. But the way you described your chest pains, I thought it was 50-50 you had a heart attack. Last thing I wanted to do is tell you that, just in case you had a heart attack, and then you had another one. That happened to another patient of mine, Bernardo Petrosante. You know Bernardo? Well, let me look at this. You're fine. Let me just wait on the blood gases. Double check that. Go out there and do the paperwork for Sheila at the desk. I think it's just a muscle problem. The son of a gun had not only made sure I didn't know it might be serious, it might be heart attack serious, but he conned me into going to the emergency room without alarming me or even letting me know that was his plan all along. And as I'm brushing the shaved hairs off my chest and putting my shirt on, I say thanks, and then it hits me. Hey, another thing, Doc. Bernardo Pietrosante and Umberto Flambini and all these other patients you've mentioned all these years, they don't really exist, do they? And he says, yeah, you got me about that. I learned a long time ago, make sure your patient never feels like they're the first idiot to have done this to themselves. Come on, I'll give you a lift back to your folks. Might look in and see how your dad's doing if he's got a moment. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. My face was stuck to the side of the train window, and they were about to move the train back into storage. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Dr. Cicilline. Even despite that, what a great man he was. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled the orchestration and the keyboards, produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. Sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our satirical and pithy musical comments were by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Howard Feynman, and everything else was pretty much my fault. And that's Countdown for this, the 294th day until the 2024 U.S. presidential election, and the 1,107th day since Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the 14th Amendment, the Insurrection Act, the justice system, and the GOP primary to stop him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.